Welcome to Skilled to Pay Your Bills. This is Don Moragne, and welcome to the special segment called the Wealth Zone University. As you know, our mantra is change your mind about money so we can change your financial future. Over the course of several shows, we've been talking about various aspects of the real secrets of money. Today, we're going to go into something that I think we're all going to enjoy, but I think we're all going to learn a lot from. You know, one of the things that we always espouse is that being in business for yourself is the ultimate freedom. I have with me as my guest today a man who has taken that mantra and actually turned it into a reality. I'm very proud to introduce you to Charles Ofori. Charles Ofori is a man who's going to spend the next few minutes telling us about himself, how he achieved his success, and also gives us some words of wisdom about how you can do the same thing. So, Charles, welcome.
Thank you, Don.
Charles is the CEO of a company called Ofori and Associates. And Charles, tell us a bit about yourself and a bit about your company, would you?
I came to the United States in 1978 and went to Howard, finished Howard, worked for CACI, MCI, and worked for some accounting firms. And during that time, I had a little hard time getting to work on time. Why? Because I lived very far. And as an accountant, you're supposed to be very precise and very consistent.
And on time.
And on time. And I wasn't living up to that because I couldn't, I-95 traffic was always getting me. So I decided that in order to not get a lot of warnings from my supervisors, to go into business for myself and see what I can do. Now, it's so interesting that when I started working for myself, I was getting to work at 6:30. Because I realized that now nobody's paying my bills and I have to be the one that's going to be in charge.
That's incentive, right?
That's
we
right.
go from being late at 10 to being early at 6.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Now tell us, what does Ofori and Associates do? Tell me what the firm does.
We are a CPA and management consulting firm. We provide financial services to public and the private sector, but now we've concentrated a lot on government contracts. Because one of the things that I learned is when I got in business, I realized that most of the clients that I have were doing government contracts and were making a lot of money. And
Okay.
that became an incentive for me. I realized that if I was going to be in business for myself and be successful, I have to look at what the other successful people were doing. And it dawned on me that they were providing services for the government. And so I said, well, as an accountant, I understand how businesses are supposed to operate. And I got into government contracting.
Wow. So that's an instance where you, as the person who's providing the services, look and see how well your clients are doing and then decide, I'm going to make sure I emulate that so that I can get to where they are.
That's absolutely right.
So it's government contracting now. And
Right.
that's still something that Ofori and Associates is doing really well.
Right.
Right? But what I understand is that you're not only a government contractor, that you manage contracts. How did you decide to go into that aspect of government contracting?
Yes. One of the things that early on that I realized was I could not just by myself become as successful as I wanted to be. So one of the things that I decided to do was to learn how to manage people. Getting the work is difficult, but you have to be able to bring in people, supervise them, manage them so that the client is pleased with the outcome. And in so doing, I learned one of the key things in running a business: how to manage people, make sure they're happy, they get it on time, they're doing what they're supposed to do, and reward them very well, which I did, and it turned out to be a very good thing to do.
Okay, so now you're in business for yourself,
Right.
and getting there on time.
Right.
You're in the government space, which exposes you to probably lucrative contracts and more money.
Right.
You've learned that you need to manage people as opposed to doing all the work yourself. But when you walked into that government space, how did you learn the procurement process? You told me earlier that you actually talked to people who were successful.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about that.
Yes. I think when you get into a new arena, one of the things that you have to try to do is to find out the people who've done it before and have been successful. And read as much material, as much literature as you can get. Well, in talking to some of the successful 80 firms or companies, I realized that it's a lot of hard work. Now, nobody's going to come knocking on your door giving you any contract. So what I used to do was between 9:30 and 4 or 5 o'clock, I was out at the government agencies or talking to different people that have been very successful. I talked to them to see how they've managed to be successful. And some of them were very liberal with me. Well, I might add, I had to buy them lunch. that's the least I could do, which was a small price to pay. I also used to do a lot of cold calls. I'll get a list of clients or, call people to see if they need my services. Interesting. One day, one of the people that I called told me there was nothing to account for, so he doesn't need an accountant. But it didn't discourage me, though.
Okay.
I still, was bent on making sure that my family and myself are taken care of. I used to work 10, 12 hours.
So the thing that I hear is that not only did you take it upon yourself to learn the process of government accounting,
Yes.
but you also, and cold calling, which most
right.
people hate to do, but it's one of the things that is extremely valuable to do.
Right.
Cold calling.
It really is. I actually got a lot of clients by cold calling. The times that you call somebody and they have had just a fallout with their accountant or somebody, and you never know. So the thing is not to be afraid of rejection. I mean, you're going to get all sorts of people saying no. I mean, I've been to government agencies where I wasn't even let in. When I was let in, they said, we don't have any accounting work. And I always tell them, I can do more than accounting. When you are in business, one of the key things is not to look at yourself as an accountant, as a lawyer, as a doctor. You have to look at yourself as a businessman.
As a businessman.
Very
good advice.
And that changes the whole thinking. You have to be able to manage people. And in managing people, it doesn't matter whether you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, or this. Because by yourself, you cannot do it all. And that's what I've tried to do, get good people in place.
I hear also in your discussion, though, that you had no problem identifying people who were successful and then going to them and asking them the key to their success and would they share it with you.
Right.
Did you find those people receptive?
A lot of them were. A lot of them were, because I always let them know that, look, I'm really impressed by what you've done, and that's something that I like to do. And whatever knowledge that they can share with me, I will appreciate that. And most of them were very, very kind enough to see that at least, they can have a discussion with me. Of course, sometimes it gets a little interesting because these are very busy people.
Yes, yes.
And their time is very valuable, and you have to be a little tactful in how you approach these things. I might add that you have to be very nice to the receptionist when you call. So
a vital piece, a vital piece.
Yeah, you have to be very nice so they can put your call through.
So now, years later, you're in the seat that these successful people were. You're successful.
Right.
And we're coming to you to ask you how you're doing it and to share it with us.
Right.
The most important thing that you've done, though, is that you have instilled in your two sons the ability to want to be in business,
Right.
the understanding that being in business is important,
Right.
and to follow in your footsteps. Tell us a little bit about that. You have two great sons who we're going to talk to in our next segment, but how did you get your sons to understand how important it was to be in business?
Well, one of the things that I always have shared with them is it's hard to be something that you cannot see. kids usually want to see and they can follow. So whatever it is, I used to take them with me to the office, have them arrange checks, and always, talk to them about, I'm in business for myself. That's why I'm coming home at 10, 11 o'clock, because they always wondered, Dad, why are you always so late? And I'd let them know that if they wanted to make something out of themselves, they have to work for themselves. Nobody's going to make a pot of money and come give it to you,
That's exactly right.
when you work for them. So for self-fulfillment and to lead the kind of life that they envision, I always instill in them that to work for yourself is the ultimate goal. No matter how much amount of money somebody pays you, the ultimate freedom is to be somebody that can come and go as you wish, like I'm doing now.
Audience, look at this. You've got a man who became successful himself. He learned how to become successful. That's the most important thing. He shared his information with his employees, and then he also shared it with his offspring. The most important thing is that he is successful, and he's accessible to guys like me and to people like you, because he understands that the only way to continue to be successful is to help other people be successful, including your family.
Yes.
Charles, thank you for coming and sitting with me today. We have learned a lot, and I think you have let them know that what we say about being in business, being the ultimate freedom, is actual. Any parting words?
One of the key things about being in business is to know that there's going to be failure. There's going to be rejection. You're going to fail at something. But the key thing is to keep that hope alive, is to always make sure you have a goal and you want to achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
Keep at it, hard work, and it's going to pay off. There's no easy way. Thank you.
No easy way, hard work, but also knowing exactly where you're trying to go.
Right.
Hey, this was such an interesting segment. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Don Moragne. We'll see you in the next segment where we'll be introduced to Charles's two sons. See you soon. Don't touch that dial.
Hello, I'm Chase Slade, the coolest 8-year-old kid you will ever meet. My grandpa Don gave me so much money last year, my piggy bank could no longer hold one more dollar. He told me to watch Skills to Pay the Bills on Channel 10 and learn about the real secrets of money. Then he told me to watch Egyptian Secrets on Channel 10 to learn how to stay healthy and well. You can be cool and healthy just like me by watching Skills to Pay the Bills and Rock Your Block on every week on Channel 10.
Welcome back to this segment of the Skills to Pay the Bills. This is the Wealth Zone University, and as you know, our mantra is to change your mind about money so you can change your financial future. In the last segment, we talked with Charles Ofori. He's the patriarch of a family that definitely believes that being in business for yourself is the right way to go. So what I'm going to introduce you to in this segment are Charles's two sons. We have Otis Ofori and we have Curtis Ofori. Both of these young men own their own businesses early in life, and both of these guys are really doing something good. So I'm going to stay out of the picture. I'm going to introduce you to these two young men. Otis, tell us about your company, what it's doing, how you positioned your company, and where you plan on going.
Perfect, absolutely. First, Don, thanks for having us. We're humbled by the opportunity to share our growth and our strategy going forward. For that, we really appreciate what you've been able to do and what we'll do going forward. I'm a principal at Greenhall Capital Partners. Greenhall Capital Partners is a private equity investment firm based in Washington, D.C. We look to acquire growing companies, either that have the federal government as their principal customer, or they're in old line manufacturing and different other industries, either through recapitalizations, buyouts, or working and providing them with strategic capital. Okay. And they have revenues between $1 to $15 million. We look to grow those companies by, obviously using our management skills to acquire them, and then figure out different ways to either cut costs or increase revenue. It's been an interesting opportunity to look for those different opportunities, and we continue to do that going forward.
Yeah, let me echo what Otis said. Don,
Before we do that, let me introduce you, because that's the most important thing. Now, this guy is Curtis. Curtis is also an entrepreneur, and Curtis is going to tell us a bit about his company, which is totally different from Otis's. Please.
Yeah, so again, thanks so much, Don. So I'm a principal member at Ofori Strategic Consulting.
Okay.
So what we do at Ofori Strategic Consulting is we provide private sector solutions to public sector problems. We like to work with senior executives, cabinet level officials to really figure out how do we solve the public sector's largest problems. We've been pretty fortunate to team up with some really great thought leaders in the industry, whether it's solving financial issues, whether it's solving real estate issues, and really taking a strategic approach, adding finance, adding strategy, and then working for a long-term solution. And so that's what we do at Ofori Strategic Consulting. And a lot of that's grown out of my own personal background. Prior to starting Ofori Strategic Consulting, I worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a major consulting firm. I worked in finance at Morgan Stanley. I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a Big Four accounting firm. So I use all of those experiences and what I learned at those firms to bring to my firm to bear. And we've been pretty successful so far, but we're really looking forward to really growing the franchise and using this opportunity as an entrepreneur to help the government solve its biggest problems.
So where do you see your company going right now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think as it stands right now, we have some really big issues, whether it's the fiscal cliff that we've just worked through, whether it's economic issues, whether it's environmental issues. We really see ourselves teaming up with the government, working with cabinet level officials to think about how do we solve the biggest problems. If it's data driven, we're able to do that. If it's a white paper, we're able to do that. So we love the ability to use some of our really big thinkers, whether it's attorneys like my brother is, or other PhDs to team up and solve those problems. So we really see ourselves sort of growing within a couple really big spaces to solve big problems.
And Otis, where do you see Greenhall Capital Partners going?
For us, we see ourselves growing by providing strategic capital to companies that come into us and say, hey, you know what? We have an opportunity to take over a major market or take over potential opportunities, but we're capital constrained to be able to get there. My brother started as an accountant, so he's been able to understand that you need to have a strong balance sheet. Having been a corporate attorney in a prior life, I understand you need to have those legal underpinnings. So to be able to bring those two heads to bear and to be able to grow those companies, that's what I see being our greatest challenges. And it's great to be able to sit next to growing business leaders and other people like you and saying, hey, here's what we need to do to fix these problems, and then providing return for our investors as we continue to grow and do that as well.
And so that's interesting. You're on the law track, you're on the finance track, and all of that came out of your exposure to what your dad was doing on the finance and management track.
Right.
Yes.
And so on the law track now, with your company, Greenhill Capital Partners, if you look out to, say, 5 years from now, do you see yourself still handling Greenhill Capital Partners, or you intend to diversify?
No, I see Greenhall Capital being the largest, most successful private investment firm in the world.
Okay.
I see that because I'm not constrained by what other people think. I'm not constrained by any potential roadblocks, because at the end of the day, I understand that there's a great opportunity to use the strategic capital that we have to be able to grow different companies. I've seen the way my father's managed companies, and I understand that sometimes you need that management layer. You need to be able to manage different people, and you can grow the revenue, you can cut costs, and you can be able to help these companies go forward. So having understood, I've worked on different deals, put together JVs, put together limited partnership agreements. I saw how those deals were working. I said, you know what? That's a small piece. I can do that, and I can move forward and help people also.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Curtis,
Yep.
in your space, finance space,
Right.
again, having seen what your father's done and also having the same experience that you have,
Right.
do you see Ofori Strategic Consulting as the only company you're going to have, or from an entrepreneurial perspective, do you see yourself in 5 years doing other things?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So if I understand you're thinking about, Ofori Strategic Consulting to me is like a vehicle, right? It gives me the opportunity to sort of do a lot of different things. I have clients who become, small businesses, right? So if I'm trying to figure out how do we work around sequestration, that in of itself is its own business. How do we think about, global warming? That in of itself is its own business. So I look at Ofori Strategic Consulting as the starting vehicle for how I'm going to do other things. It's the nice thing about it is, we provide this sort of financial focus, and again, when the government doesn't have as much capital but has constrained resources to try and do great things, that's where we provide the best value. And so I could ultimately see myself building other businesses, but Ofori Strategic Consulting for me right now provides the vehicle to do a lot of great different things.
That's great. Yeah, a few segments ago, we talked about young entrepreneurs. I mean, this is the prime example. These two young men are young entrepreneurs, but not only entrepreneurs, they are people that have vision, and they got their vision from their dad. So I'm going to go back around it one more time, and let's talk about that.
Yep.
Dad is the role model.
Right.
Tell us what you feel that you learned from Dad in that's making you such a strong entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Early on, we definitely try to learn by his example and his values. I mean, he's a very value-oriented person and works very hard. When we were 6, he made sure that we were reading the Wall Street Journal. By the time we were 8,
At 6.
At 6.
Most adults can't read it now.
And we had to write articles too. It's just not a matter of reading it; you had to write it as well.
Right.
By the time we were 8, he made sure that we were visiting the stock exchange. And by the time we were 11, we were understanding balance sheets and financial statements. So that was very influential on our upbringing. And I think one thing he shared with us, Don, is he would say, you don't need to define your success by working for somebody else.
Right.
It's something that washes over you, and you're very taken aback. It's something I take from Steve Jobs as well. He would say, you look out in the world and you see all these different things that have been built. These things have been built by people no smarter than you. So you need to walk around and say, you can't be constrained by what other people think you should do. You should think differently. And I think my father is a living example of that, and we've been able to grow Green Hall Capital in that same vein by, roadblocks are not something we see problems. Worry about that later. Let's get to the finish line.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Curtis,
I mean,
what did you see? What did you get from your dad?
Yeah, I mean, just to build on what Otis said, it's one thing when you see somebody living by example. It's another thing when it's right here in front of you. So my father tells this story, and I was the one who asked him this question when he wanted to start his own business. How much do we have in the bank? How much is the mortgage? Because that's just sort of how I thought. And I see myself running my own business like that, right? How do we, pay our
But
our
tell that
employees?
story right quickly.
Yeah, I'll tell it to you. He's sitting there and we're at home, and I was always very interested in what he was doing. And he's like, I'm going to start my own business. I was young. I was like, I conceptualized it, but I didn't really understand it. So, being the sort of the kid, how much money do we have in the bank? And he told me. I was like, I don't know how much that is. How much is our mortgage? And so I was like, well, if our mortgage is this and we have this in the bank, then you better be able to make X money, right?
So you gave your dad marching orders, right?
Two ends must meet. And, that's sort of why I loved accounting. And so, I use those lessons, whether it's, look up your definitions so you can have a great vocabulary, treat people the way you want to be treated. And some of those really great value-oriented lessons that I still use from that day. And I was always very interested, how do you get your first client? How do you hire good people? How do you define a business that's really going to last, the test of time? And so those things are, whether even we're debating at the table, you've got an idea, Otis wants to know, all right, let's run it down. My father wants to know, let's run it down. Those are the same things I do, with our clients today, and we're thinking back and forth. So
See, that's fantastic. And one thing, my grandson used to ask me, Grandpa, why are you making me read the Wall Street Journal? I don't even know what it's saying,
Yep.
Thank you for validating that.
Absolutely.
He's a junior in college now, so when he finishes, I'm sending him to you guys.
Hey,
So you can
we're
teach him
always
exactly how to be a
hiring.
young
Love to
entrepreneur.
have him.
The most important thing that I want to know from you guys is we've got a lot of young people listening.
Okay.
What can you tell them about being in business for themselves? Why do you think it's so important?
I think it's important because it gives you a lot of self-worth. When you're an owner, you make sure that you're there on time, things need to get done. If you're working for somebody else, you really can't see the underpinnings of what's going on.
Right.
And then 2, security. At the end of the day, we always tell every employee that we have, hey, an employee is an at-will employee. You can get left at any point. But if you own the business, you can grow it. You understand where it's going to go and where it's going to end. I always used to use Henry Kravitz' example when, as he grew KKR, which is a large private equity firm that we love to emulate. Don't congratulate me when I buy a company. Any fool can buy a company. Congratulate me after I created value and sold the company. The same thing occurs when you run the business. Congratulate us after we've grown the franchise, been able to work on their different revenue streams, work on their different lines of business, and get rid of other entities that may or may not work. So that's what we're doing with Green Hall, and that's what we're doing to kind of create that.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the advice I would give is this. I mentioned before that my father had us reading the Wall Street Journal and looking up definitions so we could expand our vocabulary, but he also had us reading a lot of books. And a couple books he had us read were, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich, the magic of thinking big. So the advice I would give is think broadly, right? Do not be constrained by what's in front of you because this world is really, really large. And so that would be my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice I would give is be the first in line. So as the eldest, I understand leadership means you're the first. You're the first to open the door, you're the first to raise your hand, because when you're the first, you define the conversation, right? Everything follows after that. And so leadership really means, being the first in line. And once you're doing that, and that's really what entrepreneurship gives you. When you start that company, you're the first employee, and you define the legacy of that company moving forward. And that's how I've always thought about it.
Wow. See, that's important. And it's not only just some guy telling you that as a young person that you can do it. We have two people sitting here who have learned it, who are doing it, who are planning to make sure that their lives and their entrepreneurial spirits are what the world becomes for them. Parting words. What would you give to our audience, just a few words that Otis wants everybody to know about being in business?
I would say it's a humbling opportunity. By no means is it always going to be successful. If it was easy, everybody would do it. The one thing I would tell anybody who goes into business for themselves, be persistent. I guarantee you, your first no is your third yes. You have to get out there and do it. And don't be afraid. I think what always happens is, I think you've said it before, some people are afraid of success. A lot of people are afraid of failure. Trust me, President Barack Obama failed. Investor David Schwartzman failed. Even Steve Jobs failed, but guess what? They all came back.
Right.
You fail if you do not take the opportunities.
And if you don't do anything, you'll never fail.
If you don't take anything, you will never fail.
Curtis,
So, I mean,
please.
the advice I would give is this: be humble, be honest, be truthworthy, and then once you combine those three things, ask for help. I think I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by incredibly successful, driven business people.
Right.
My brother being a great example, my father being one, my mother also being another one. I have what I call them my board of directors, and they are the folks who I lean on for advice and strategic thinking. And so, to the extent you have a board of directors or somebody you really trust, use those folks when you're up against a challenge or you're not thinking big enough. Once you create that sort of circle of trust, for lack of a better term, then you're able to do really great things, because guess what? The people who love you, the people who think about you, are going to make sure that you can do great things.
This has been probably one of the most rewarding segments I've had. Gentlemen, thank you for coming to visit us. Two things I want you to remember. You can do it. Am I right?
Yes.
And if you need to know how to do it, please contact Otis Ofori, Curtis Ofori. This is Don Moragne signing off. And again, hopefully we've changed your mind about money, because you absolutely can change your financial future. Gentlemen, thank you for coming
so
and
much,
visit with
Don.
me today.
Hey,
We're
thanks,
going to
Don.
do this again.
Absolutely.
All right? Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.